Welcome back to the Authentic Human podcast. And today I have the unique pleasure of inviting Kyle Meintjes in. And Kyle is with us, thank goodness, to technology all the way from South Africa, which, Kyle, welcome and thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm very excited to be here.
I, again, know nothing about Kyle. My team reached out and brought us together. And I am told that Kyle has a really unique and quite fascinating awakening story. And I'm excited for Kyle, for you to share that with us. And, we're going to see if the universe and if your soul and whomever else on the universal side has some insight and some wisdom to share with you, whether it's about
Mm.
your awakening, but also, now in your life. And if you have questions along the way, please ask all of them. The more questions you ask, the more answers you're going to get.
Okay, amazing.
Awesome. So tell me about you.
Okay, wow. Yeah, this is where to start. So the thing for me is health and awakening are very tied together, or that's where it all started for me, was with health. And I mean it seems like that's where it started, like in the mind, but things were in motion before that. I can feel like yeah, relationship was opening me up. So I mean, let's go back to 2020, was when, because there was a lot of change in that time as well. If we think about like COVID and
Lots of change.
yeah, exactly.
Huge.
So much change, right? And I feel like that sparked things to change in my path as well. Uh, yeah, so I mean, I was at university at the time. I was in a relationship, and that relationship had done a lot. Looking back, I probably wasn't looking at things like this at that time, but it did a lot to open me up. But there was a lot of challenges as well. And anyways, I do remember as that relationship was kind of coming to its end. The same time I had just had COVID, I'd gotten some weird after effects from COVID. So this put me in contact for the first time with this unknown of my life changing. Like what's happening with my health, and not and losing control. Really, that's what was happening, right? I was starting to lose control of my surroundings and my life. And
Yes.
yeah, it was a slow burn initially, right? So and as I said, it started all around health, but I've reflected back on it a couple of times more through the awakening lens. And one thing I do remember happening is, as all of this was culminating, so like my health, after a couple of months of still being sick after COVID, I was getting really, it was bringing up a lot of deep emotions. It was bringing up, that fear of, yeah, of health and all of that, and yeah, this inner turmoil. And I remember the thing was, though, I'd been struggling for a long time in my life, like uh it's all through growing up, my teenage years, high school, university. I never felt like I was making it. I never felt authentic. I never felt, I did when I was a young kid, and then entered into high school, and
Yep.
yeah, how we
I
start to
do.
put on this like outer appearance, and try to fit in and try to play the game, fit into the matrix. um so yeah, and what was happening for me was, at each stage of my life, I was getting more desperate, almost, in like end of high school. I'm not happy. Okay, university is where I'm going to be happy, right? Then, like, first year of university ends, and I hadn't made any really close friends, and I was still very struggling, internally. And I was like, oh, okay, second year of university. And obviously there was phases to it. Like, I did
Yeah.
outwardly, I looked, people wouldn't have thought that I looked like a happy guy. I was very active, busy, all of that. I had a girlfriend. Um, but even in the relationship, it wasn't genuine. It wasn't authentic, but it served its role. It opened me up a lot.
Yeah.
I can, yeah, I mean, it was exactly what I needed at that time. Uh,
I love
oh,
talking to people who can look and see all the sides. It's just fascinating.
yeah,
I'm loving listening to you. This is fantastic. You're like, it's this,
amazing.
but it's I also saw it from this side. And now I can
Yeah,
see it from this side, but at the time I didn't know, right? Yep.
yeah, exactly. It's so funny when it all clicks into place later, and it's like it was all just like divinely planned. But at the time, the mind had all these ideas of what life was supposed to be, of who I'm going to be. All of this kind of
And
conditioning.
then when someone
And
says, go back and tell it from the beginning, it's hard to go back to the
yeah,
place where you don't have the full awareness. Like you'll never be there
mm,
again. Once you have awareness, you're
mm,
changed forever. Your vibration is completely changed, right? So you can go
yeah,
back and share the story, which I'm loving you're doing, but you can't fully embody that anymore because you're not there. You're
yeah,
so much more, right? So this is
yeah.
fascinating.
It's
Yes.
so true. It's like, yeah, when people ask me to talk about, it's like, well, I can talk about health because that's what it felt like at the time. Was like I'm sick and all of this, but it just doesn't even look like that from this side at all. So
Funny, right? Yes, I totally get
it's so
it.
it's so funny. Um, but
So,
yeah, yeah.
yep. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Yeah. So from you were in university, girlfriend, couple years
Mm,
in, still like looks amazing from the outside,
mm,
but
yeah. But yeah, inside, here's the thing that started coming up for me was uh because the relationship, like, it was doing its job, right? It was kind of bringing
yep,
out the healing and the challenges we both needed to face. And one of it was her asking me, like, what do you want? Because I was saying I'm not happy in this relationship, and but I don't know what I want, because then we would end the relationship and then I would want the relationship back, and then it was like, I had no idea what to do. But she was opening up because I had become very emotionally dead. I
yep.
was like, and
Shut
this
down.
this yeah, so shut down. And I remember, I haven't thought about this a lot, but it's coming up for me. Like, I remember nights of loads of crying and like intense emotions that I hadn't been in touch with for a long time because
Yeah.
of the dynamics of the relationship. So again, it was beautiful what it was doing for me. And then at some point, because that combined with my health, and then that was starting to challenge I also actually was I went on to like antidepressant medication at that time as well. It was originally recommended for the COVID stuff that I was doing, but I jumped at it because had been like
Yeah.
struggling with my life so much. So he was like, "Oh, like the doctor at the
Salvation,
time." Yeah,
salvation, right?
exactly.
Yes.
It's like, maybe this
Yes.
could like boost your mood. Like, he said it will help with all the headaches and all the symptoms I was having, but maybe it'll boost your mood as well. And I was like, oh, I need this. Like, I
Bring
need
it on.
something.
Yep.
Yeah,
Totally get
exactly.
that.
Yeah, it was something I remember in high school. Like, always I would try like these like simple things that I heard had like would make you happy, because
Yes.
I was struggling so much in high school. Like, there
I love
was,
that. But I
yeah,
love because that shows me how in touch you already were,
mm,
even when you were younger, and you didn't even
mm,
realize how, this is amazing. Thank you.
yeah,
Thank you.
amazing.
Thank you. Keep going.
I love it. Yeah. Yeah. So the funny thing was, yeah, to be honest, so the first antidepressant medication I tried, it did help. It opened me up a lot socially. It was like it was a SNRI, so it worked on like serotonin, and that was actually helpful for me in one sense. I felt less of this anxiety that I'd always felt socially, and then but I didn't feel myself, and then I was struggling with all of these. Uh, kind of symptoms as well. And then it had been like months, and I was like, now what's from the medication and what's still from COVID? So at some point I was like, no, I don't want to take this anymore. And then I played with a couple of others actually, which had quite different effects. But the funny thing is, looking back at it now, I can say how the medication was wrong. It didn't work. But same thing as anything else. It played its role at the time. Like,
Yep.
the funny thing was, like, one of the medications I went on to was Wellbutrin, which is a dopamine and norepinephrine. It works on those systems in the brain, so it helps a lot with like focus and uh, energy. Because that was one of the big things with the COVID stuff. I was really struggling with fatigue, and I mean, it wasn't COVID as much as my mind thought it was. It was more energetically like where my energy was going towards. But
Yeah.
yeah, so, but the funny thing is the Wellbutrin got me through my semester at university where yeah, it's like I didn't think of it at the time, but I was working a hell of a lot. Like I was studying economics and like long nights, and I was taking this, and I was like, oh, that was probably actually necessary at the time to help me deal with all the symptoms and get through my workload. But what was happening is it was making me more anxious because it works on like norepinephrine, which is like got to do with stress and all of that. It was I was what I remember started happening is I was getting so much tension building up in my body because
Yeah.
I'd never meditated before. I'd never done yoga. I'd never done anything to kind of help release. I was
Yeah.
always like I was in the gym. I was playing like high intensity sports. I was like go 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 24/7. I had this like strong drive and yeah, socializing and whatnot. And I remember what started happening was I would get this intense like jaw pain
Yeah.
because of how like tight and locked up I was, and yeah, all of that.
It's
So
really cool because as you're saying it, I can see it's like your central nervous system was so overstimulated. That's how I'm
exactly,
seeing it, is
exactly.
that, and your body didn't have an outlet for that
Yeah,
energy, right?
yeah. I'm so glad you put it like that because that's exactly what it was. It was this overload of stimulation on my nervous system, like being on a semi-stimulant, and but also yeah, I was like addicted to my phone. Because like there was so much locked up in the
Yep.
nervous system, like emotionally and trauma wise, that yeah, I just it had been building up for years and years,
Yeah.
and at the same time in my relationship, I was getting so stressed out about that I didn't know how to deal with it, and all this kind of build up
Well, you didn't
energetically and
have the capacity to turn off. That's what that drug was doing, is it was making
mm,
you on all the time, which
mm,
meant that, that feeling like, whether you're in meditation or, for people who spend a lot of time outdoors, you have that ability to decompress, right? It
yeah,
didn't let you decompress ever. So
yeah,
now you've got the central nervous system. The central nervous system needs to be decompressed, right? On
yeah,
every single day. That's why we
yeah,
sleep, and it's why we need to be outside, and we need fresh water, fresh fruit. Like, these are, I know that they sound so simple, but
mm,
it is so important, and you weren't getting any of it. But on top of that, it was like stress piling up on top of stress and
yeah,
stress, so it was feeding each other, right? So
yeah,
you're in this like no win battle. So it's really
yeah,
fascinating. I'm right here with you. Okay, so
yeah. No, I love that. I love that perspective on it because, yeah, it's exactly that. And even my sleep was getting affected. Like I wasn't sleeping, but it's like you said, it was just coming from all angles, right? There was the medication, it was the relationship, it was the university. I was like really overloaded with work, and the funny thing was, I never had a very good at university. I've always been very gifted intellectually, so I've never developed a great work ethic because at high school I just kind of breezed through high school, and I would still do that at university, but what would happen is I would find myself in intensely high stress
yeah,
situations because I didn't manage my time properly. I would just let it all build up and then pile through it at like 2 a.m. in the morning or something like that.
yeah,
So yeah, I didn't know how to manage my my like plan my stress and look after myself like that. So yeah, it was that kind of whirlwind of stress at the time. And
yep,
then so this was something I wanted to mention earlier. Then what started happening with all of this, like it just felt like my life was falling apart, to be honest. I was coming to this place where, yeah, my relationship was ending, my health was deteriorating. Uh, and here's what happened. I started doing a lot more research into my health because I was like, something needs to give here. Like my life is falling apart. So one thing that started happening was, yeah, the relationship really started to finally actually end. Like we'd been on and off, and
right.
now it was like,
Which creates more
okay,
stress in itself, right? That's
exactly,
wow.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. There was so much emotional turmoil going on there, and yeah, trying to kind of because looking back now, I'm always feel into other people's. This was one of my problems is I never really put myself first. I was always putting other people's emotions first because I can feel what they're feeling so
yeah,
so strongly, And this was one of the stresses as well, was like I needed to end this relationship, but then I also wasn't being fair to the other person because I wasn't always being genuinely authentic and, you know, telling them truly how I felt. But that was the best I could do at the time, to be honest. If I look back at who I was then, it was, yeah.
But okay, so I'm just gonna, may I interject? Because I want to hear more, but
Yeah.
I also feel like this is really important. And what they're showing me is not only like, it's like you're still carrying some of that right behind your head on the back of your neck. It's, um, um, okay. So you were in a position where your brain couldn't function properly because your central nervous system was overstimulated. You
Mm,
need to understand that,
mm,
because your brain couldn't function properly, that's why you were not able to make healthy decisions for you or anyone. Like,
right.
I
Right.
know that you saw, like, you can see it all now. I get that. But
Yeah.
they want you to understand that there is more to it, in the sense that you were so when your central nervous system is being affected, okay,
Yeah.
your brain has zero capacity for logical thinking anymore. Zero.
Right.
And
Right.
by zero, I mean it does not know right from wrong anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. This is why
Yeah.
crazy things happen in the world. Ridiculous. Like,
Right.
people do crazy things because it just keeps piling on. What
Yeah.
I love, okay, so you're still, and what I mean, so, okay, the first thing is you're still, it's on the back of, like, the top of the base of your spine, like the base of your, here.
Yeah.
I'm not,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's like at the top of the neck, not the base of the spine, but the base of the skull. That's the word I was looking for.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And what it is like, I feel like when I'm inside your energy, like, you can't still turn around all the way, because there's a part of you that's still sad and still
Mm,
hurts for the person that we were then, because you still worry that you hurt other people in your life. And
right.
I know, you know, that everything happened for a reason, but you
Yeah.
also need to understand that that experience played a significant role for your girlfriend at the time too. And I know you know
Yeah.
that, but
Yeah.
that was part of her awakening, because she needed to understand
Right.
communication just
Right.
as much as you needed to understand what you're going through. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. But
Yeah.
she needed to understand communication, and you were the perfect specimen to get her to specimen. I know that sounds so clinical, but you were the
Yeah. No.
perfect
Yeah.
opportunity for her to try as many things as she possibly could
Right.
to master it. Because here's the thing, part of her journey is helping people who were in the situation of being overstimulated on the central nervous system. That's part of her journey. That's part of her story. And
Right.
I bet
Right.
you, if you look into what her career is now and wherever she is, she's already going down that path, because that's what she was meant to do.
Okay.
You, on the other hand, okay, so it being able to go, oh, I contributed to her journey, instead
Right.
of, oh, I messed her up and carrying that.
Yeah.
Because,
Yeah.
like you said, you feel, and I know you feel, and you feel other people so deeply, but you
Yeah.
also, okay, so you have a spectacular ability to go to the root of the problem, the challenge, the issue, where most people see fog. You're like, no, no, this is it. It's right here, which
Yeah.
is what makes you so intellectually smart as well.
Okay.
That's how you flew through school. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
and because your analytical mind knows how to process awareness and energy like most people breathe.
Right.
Do you understand how big this is? Like, this is massive. Okay. Massive.
Okay. Yeah.
It, yes, it's a huge part of why you're here. But what I love is that as you were struggling, and you were always looking for solutions, you know, you were never content. You were like, nope, there's got to be more
Mm,
than this. Like
mm,
this doesn't feel good. There's got to be more.
mm,
And what I love is that you went to health,
mm, mm,
because when you're looking at your own well-being, right?
mm,
That also lets you know that this awareness that you've got, and this, understanding, this deep inner understanding, even when your mind doesn't even know it yet,
mm,
you have such an awareness of how energy runs through the human body, and how it's meant to, and when it's not flowing, and when it's not
mm.
working, right? So you went to
Yeah.
health right away, which I love. Okay, keep going.
Well, I just want to say something about that. That's incredible because I've been working with an energy worker recently who's been helping me kind of move energy and find out where there's blockages and stuff. And something that came up like I don't know a few days ago that I wanted to address next time I went to see her was I was like one place where I feel so blocked. And, like we hadn't touched on it because we were working on like the front energy centers and stuff. And I was like, I need to ask because I haven't. I'm quite new to working in the energy space. I've always been working more in awareness and insights and that kind of stuff. And
Yes.
and then I wanted to ask like why I have this feeling like whenever this it's exactly what you said. So when you
It's
said that
huge. It
now,
was
I was
huge. It
like,
was as big as your skull, but at the back of your neck, like at the and I was like, I can't even move my head when I'm in your energy. Okay, yeah. So I love that you get that. Yay!
that's incredible. I'm so grateful that you were able to share that because it was exactly what I was wondering about recently was what's going on there energetically. Yeah.
Yeah. And we
Yeah.
can shift it. Well, just sharing the truth of what it is already
Mm.
shifted a little
I could
bit.
already feel as you were
Yeah.
talking, like there was things clicking and like
Yeah.
moving. Yeah.
We're opening the lines now down both sides of the spinal column as we're talking. So it's literally because you were under so much, it's like everything was compressed.
Right.
But
Right.
it's also understanding that that's your communication, right? That whole,
Yeah.
and the back is how communication comes in, and you stopped taking anything in. It was more, okay, what am I going to look at? What am I going to find out? What am I going to see? Because
Mm.
it was like, when you go to a war zone and your only mission, well, when you go to, how many people have been to a war zone? It's not really the right thing to say. However, what the visual was is going to a war zone and you're like, I just need to get into the bunker. Like, I just need to pull
Mm.
everything down so nothing gets in. And that's what you've done.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
but what happened underneath is everything was calcifying. So there
Right.
was no healing, there was no movement that was happening. And so the reason that it's happening in this area is because this is where your gift is. This is where you're like there's a extreme amount of energy. So the energy wanted to flow, and that's why it kept building into like a growth at the back, but it was calcifying. It was
Right.
like thick, like bone, because
Right.
your power of communication based on your comprehension is unparalleled. Like when I say that, I mean like, and I'm having a universal perspective as well as a soul perspective, as well as a human physical perspective. It's
Right.
unparalleled in any universe, in any realm of existence. So that's why you like, until you decided, okay, I'm gonna let it come in and I'm gonna let it flow, it
Mm.
couldn't turn. So it's starting, like I can feel even the relief is coming in now.
Mm.
That sense of, okay, so I'm not crazy, right? I am, it's true. What I'm feeling is true, right? Like we need that
Mm.
confirmation. Like that's the biggest gift our soul can give us is
Mm.
confirmation of what we're feeling, right?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, keep
Wow.
going because you're amazing.
This is incredible. I'm like, what did I do to deserve this conversation?
You were you, and Susan found you. That's amazing. Thank you.
I love it. Yeah, okay. One thing that just comes up for me around all of that is to talk maybe or just is coming to mind now is that what you said about like being in the war zone. Like I remember that's what it would feel like because of high school traumas, maybe, it wasn't anything insane, but it was all this stuff that had built up. And yeah, I remember as I was getting more into understanding psychology and starting to, go within, was at some point realizing like, oh my gosh, yeah, like my mind is in the space where it's looking for danger constantly.
Yeah.
Like I would be sitting somewhere and I would hear somebody coming, and the first thoughts that would run through my mind is like, how do I make sure that they don't like harm me, or how do I, make sure that I don't embarrass myself, or it's so
Yeah.
there's, like you said, it was just constantly like scanning
Yep.
my environment to not upset somebody or not, do something like that, yeah, which was a big deal at that time.
Well, it's a
But
huge deal. And that's PTSD. And
yeah,
and
yeah,
the
exactly.
reality is, from my understanding, is over 90% of the population has it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I would
yeah,
completely agree with that, because I mean, I just look like your very average human being, in the sense that, I was going to university, I was socializing, I
yeah.
was in a relationship, I was playing sports. I looked like great, guys. And then, yeah, like you said, I realized that in myself as well. It's like, yeah, it's PTSD really.
But
But
the problem is that society won't honor that you're going
mm,
through something because it looks perfect on the outside, right? So,
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
I've also worked with a lot of veterans who come back and they're going through massive challenges. And so I'm not downplaying. I just want everybody to know who's listening. Like, I'm not downplaying war zones by any means. I've seen
Mm,
that. I've worked in that realm as well as this. And I want, Kyle, I want you to understand, and I also want our listeners to understand that PTSD is the result of a human experiencing anything that goes against the natural state of being.
mm,
Period.
mm,
Period. And so, you knew that what you were doing and what you were experiencing was going against your natural state of being. And yet it looked
yeah.
perfect on the outside to
Right, right.
everybody else, to what
Yeah,
we've been taught is perfect. So
yeah,
keep going,
yeah.
please.
Yeah. Well, yeah, what something that I really like that you said there was, yeah, me knowing that I wasn't doing what I was meant to be doing. Like I felt that in the conversations I was having with people, in the, like, again, going back to the relationship I was in at the time, the people that we would hang out with, I was feeling I had to hide, myself, so that
Yes.
I could fit in with the crowd. And that's exactly it. That was the PTSD, was the kind of feeling of, and it was suffocating. It was like, there was something in me that was just like, yeah, screaming all the time, this isn't me, this isn't me, this isn't me.
Yeah.
And but so then this was, I think, what I wanted to come back to earlier, was, as everything was falling apart on the relative level, uh I remember saying to my girlfriend, I was getting into, like, my intellectual self was really serving me there, because I was getting into podcasts, and my interest, like you said, my interest was finally shifting into well-being, whereas in the past it had always been invested in success, right? Because again, it's
Yes.
like, what is the programming that we have, right? I remember at some point when I was growing up, it's so funny reflecting back on these kinds of things now, but I remember at some point when I was growing up, the belief came into my system that I need to be successful. Like I was like looking around at the world, and I was like, what is this all about? What is this whole thing about? And then I just remember at some point started reading about success. I was like, okay, I went on the internet. I was like, books about success. I just became consumed by, I need to become successful because that's just like,
Yes.
yeah, that's just what's coming in, I guess,
Yep.
Um, yeah, it's so funny though. Like you forget that. Like I forget that at a time, and then after all the awakening stuff started happening, all these things start to come back from the, like, the, I guess, the different formations of identity and all that. And it was like, oh yeah, I remember at some point this quest for success started. Um,
And
yeah.
we
So
have
that,
those memories, right, for a reason when they come up,
yeah,
right? And
yeah,
and it's in itself synchronicity, right? it's
yeah,
it's understand, like, how today, you've mentioned a couple times, you're like, oh, I just had this thought and this memory about this. And
yeah.
that's the sign of someone who's following energy,
Right,
who's
right.
not preparing everything in their mind to present themselves and to perform. It's the
Yeah,
sign of an authentic human, which
yeah,
is someone who trusts that they will know what they need to know when they need to know it. And
yeah. Yeah.
Most people
Yeah.
don't do that because we've been
Yeah.
taught, we went through education systems that made darn sure we didn't do that. And
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
why we lost
Exactly.
touch with feeling. It's
Yeah.
100%. It's amazing. Yes, this is
Yeah.
great. I am loving your story and I am loving the conversation through it. Wow. Thank you.
Yeah, no, this is amazing for me too. Yeah, okay. I'm jumping a little bit ahead
No,
now
it's
to
jump.
now, but but it's like that's what life feels like now. It's such an incredible space to live from, where you just things just and it's everything just feels like synchronicity, because it's like
Yes.
somebody comes up and like a friend, and we start having this conversation, or a friend will message me and say like, hey, can we meet up? And then I have no idea what it's going to be about, and then we're talking and I'm just being genuine, and then it brings out what they wanted to ask me, and then it's like some deep emotional stuff, and I'm like, this is crazy.
Yeah, isn't
The
that
way things.
crazy? I was doing that at 12 on the lunchtime on the side of the soccer field at school in grade school. So, I
Wow.
get it. I
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
100% get it. There are those of us who are just meant to share higher information, and
yeah.
you can't do that if you have a
Mm,
predetermined idea of who you need to be and what you need to say, right?
yeah,
It's
yeah,
phenomenal.
yeah, yeah, it's true.
So where are you now? What was that big like moment where you kind of went, there's a bigger picture here?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, so there's still a lot to get through on the story side. So
I
a
love it.
lot, we've barely scratched the surface.
We're going to be here for a week, folks.
Yeah, this is gonna be your longest interview ever.
I love it.
Okay, so what the thing that happened was, as I said, I started getting into podcasts, and I was a book that was actually really, this was before I got into spirituality and awakening and all of that, was
Yep.
Matthew McConaughey's book Green Lights. I don't know if you know it.
I
Um,
bought it. It's sitting on my bookshelf somewhere. It's been there since I bought it. I haven't read it yet.
okay, okay,
It was good.
it was a perfect book for me at that time, because
Yep.
it showed me a different way of living, right? So
Yes.
I was so inspired by listening to how he was living. And at the same time, I was listening to podcasts by Jay Shetty. I don't know if you know, he's like
Yep. Familiar
yeah,
with him too. Yep. I
yeah,
haven't seen any of his work, but I'm familiar with it. Yes.
yeah, yeah. I don't like that work probably wouldn't resonate so much with me now, but at that time, it was exactly
Yes.
the breadcrumbs, right? It
Yep.
was like exactly what I needed to hear to put me on
Yes.
this path, but not too much that I would get put off by like spiritual talk or something like that at that
Yep.
time, because I was very, this is the way the world is. So yeah, Matthew McConaughey's book, basic that, and listening to Jay Shetty, and realizing that there's this another way of being in the world, like listening that he had been like a monk, and then Matthew McConaughey would talk about how he just went and did things, right? He was like, he just went, he would get like, he was so in touch with his intuition. Clearly, he would say like he would have this dream, and then the next day he'd pack his bags and go to the Amazon for like and I was like, what
Love
the,
that.
this is not how I live my life. Like, what? I was like, I wish I like felt comfortable doing that, or just felt that I was allowed to do that. So that really started.
Allowed is a good word. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I felt like this is not how you live, right? You have to live in these kind of ways. All this
Under
programming that I
these
had,
rules. Yes.
yeah,
Yep.
and yeah, all these beliefs about what it means to be a human being. Um, so what the thought that came to my mind, and this was also because the relationship was coming up a lot. Like, I don't know who I am really. Like,
Because she asked
and
you that one powerful question. What do you
yeah,
want?
yeah, exactly. What do you want? And then that started like tearing me up from the inside, but in a great way in the long run. Of
Yep.
like, it was the start of like self inquiry before I even knew what that was. But
It's
I just
amazing, isn't it? Yep.
Yeah, right. It was like this. It was that. It was just like calling into the universe, like saying, "Okay, I really want to know who I am." I didn't think of this at the time, but again, I've looked back at it and I've listened to other people talk about, how they had these illnesses brought on, when they asked for certain things from the universe. And I remember I was just, yeah, desperate to know. I realized I was like, I have no idea who I actually am. I've played all these roles, I've done all these things, but I actually have no clue who I am. So then the whole thing, I dropped out of university because of my health, because I was doing a lot of research into chronic illness. So I was looking at long COVID, and I was looking at like chronic fatigue syndrome, and
Yep.
this sent me down a spiral of fear and uh shutting off like from the world,
Yep.
because I was taking on all this fear from online of
Yes.
what it meant to be uh yeah, like this other, the fear of
Oh
the health
yeah.
of the symptoms. And yeah,
It's
so
it was real. And actually that's when I in 2019, yeah, in 2020 I started a community online for people from all over the world so we could get truth and get to the heart of it,
mm,
because like you, there was so many people spiraling
mm,
from the immense amount of fear from
yeah,
all sides. So it was
yeah,
just, like you were looking, we were, yes, the medical and the government and everybody would had a perspective. And then there
yeah,
was also this underground, and it was also filled with fear. And that's what you start
yeah,
tapping into. Because the moment you're like, I want more information about long COVID, I
yeah,
want more information about chronic fatigue, that's when you're sitting there and now you're playing. And I call it kind of playing in fire, because there's a
yeah,
lot of people who get so angry at what they
yeah,
find, and then they take that anger and then they spew the anger instead of focusing on the truth.
yeah, yeah, so
And
true.
it's
Yeah,
so destructive, because
yeah,
all you're doing, so anger is fear, period.
yeah,
And
yeah,
it's great, because whenever I'm angry, I'm like, okay, what am I really scared of? Okay, perfect, move on. Like then you can deal with it
yeah,
and move on, which is great. But most people don't do that. They don't understand that
yeah,
anger is fear. They just sit in the anger, and then they hold this, what I call self-righteous indignation, and they sit in that
mm,
place of, I'm right and you need to prove to me why you're doing all of this crap.
mm,
And then it becomes this he said, she said.
mm,
And it was like thick tar, right? Weeding between trying to figure out
mm,
what the heck's true, what's not. And
mm,
that spiral was a really dark place for so many people who wanted more truth. So
right, right,
I'm,
yeah,
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 I love though that you were looking outside the box. You were
yeah,
looking at, you picked up a book and then you started listening to a podcast that were
mm,
outside of your normal, what you would have
yeah,
normally
yeah,
gone through. And to your point, they changed your beliefs. And
yeah,
that's the most important thing humans can do. If
yeah,
you want to change your life, you change your beliefs,
yeah,
period. Yeah.
yeah,
So,
exactly. Yeah, eventually, yeah, I got to the like exploring belief on a deep level, but that came a bit later. But what you said about like the fear and the anger online, I was actually talking with somebody about this recently, about the things that, the COVID, that how it affects the nervous system. And I was like, one of the biggest things that I've realized that affected the nervous system so much wasn't just the actual virus of COVID. I mean, I don't know exactly what happened there, but it was way, way more the societal fear that was happening at the time. I was like, you're getting all of this kind of input, that because there was a societal fear
oh
around the
yeah.
virus. Like I don't know, yeah,
Oh, massive. We were where we are in Canada, in Ontario. We had the longest lockdowns in North America.
oh wow.
Oh, yeah. So we're living the dream over here. Yeah.
Yeah,
So I
yeah,
know exactly what you're talking about. It was,
yeah,
um, yeah, the mental game was very strong on the
yeah,
manipulation part, for sure, for sure, for sure.
yeah, exactly. And then that I was talking about somebody like that also had this, like these health struggles, and it was like the input that your mind now has what this virus is. It's like, oh, okay, so this is an incredibly dangerous virus. And now, and again, I said I don't understand it exactly, but I started to realize that, yeah, a lot of it has to do with the input I was taking in about, like, so then I got the virus, and then that's why I was like, so uh any weird symptom that I was getting, I was like, what is this? I don't know what COVID is, and I don't know why it's making, all of this happen. And then, yeah, then that fear expanded as I went into these online communities now, like the MECFS communities and the long
Oh,
COVID communities. I was like going into these, yeah, very dark, and like you said, that like I see it because I've gone back into those spaces now from a very different perspective to try and, work with people. And it's anger, right? That's what I feel when I go there now, is like there's anger, but then they'll just project it onto anybody that tries to challenge their beliefs, because it's like, yeah, you can't just accept, like you said, it's like the truth, and then instead of accepting it, you'll kind of, yeah, just have this anger with, as you said, is fear as well.
And
So
it's really cool because I had a conversation about this morning, which I love, is we as humans, and I think you'll understand because this will also go back to your whole journey.
mm,
When anything challenges who we are, it never just challenges one piece.
mm,
So it's like if there's a new concept that someone wants to bring to the table, right? If that one concept, like let's say there was an issue in the COVID situation, right? And so if a medical doctor then had to challenge, like, are we really doing the right thing? Is
yeah,
this, what's really going on? But for them to challenge that means that they would have to challenge their entire belief system about all the years
mm,
they put into their education,
mm,
all the hundreds of thousands of dollars they put into their education, and then starting up their practice in whatever capacity that is. They also
yeah,
would then have to challenge, the foundation that they have that, potentially cares for their entire family. They may be the only, sole provider. So
mm,
it's understanding, like the anger is so many layers thick. And
yeah, yeah,
instinctually, like when you were like, what do I want? That's why that question put you into a spiral, because you're like, I have no freaking idea what I want. And
yeah,
yet I'm busy here and here and here and here. And I'm doing all this and I'm doing all this, but none of it is bringing me joy. And that's where you, like you kept saying, like, I'm
mm,
not being authentic. I'm
mm,
just showing up and I'm being a shell. You are an automatic pilot. But that question brought you into that
mm,
spiral. You see what I mean?
yeah,
It's
yeah,
fascinating, right?
yeah, yeah.
And like when I first started, it's funny that you said your journey was with books. Like mine, I started with The Alchemist. And
Okay, I haven't actually read it, but I've heard, yeah, that it's a powerful book. Yeah.
well, in the first 10 years of my journey, I probably read it 4 to 6 times a year. A
Oh
year.
wow.
Right. And everyone's like, why? Didn't you know the story? I'm like, okay, it wasn't about the story.
Yeah,
What it was doing was reminding me to look for signs, because that whole
yeah,
book is about, just like how you talked about with Matthew McConaughey, he would have a dream and then he would act on it. That
yeah.
whole book reminded me every day, look for the signs, look for the signs. So when I went into
Right.
turmoil, I'd go to bed at night and I'm like, okay, reading, and I'm like, okay, there's a bigger picture to this event. It's crazy,
Mm,
but there's a sign here. So it would help me relax, because when we relax, we can see it.
mm,
When we're in that state
right.
of overstimulation, you can't see anything, which is where you were, right? So it's
Yeah.
it's fascinating. Yeah, it's anyways, okay, this is super cool. I love
Amazing.
it because we're talking about the like span of years, right? And so
Yeah.
much awareness that, you know, was collected. And that's so valuable, especially to people who are going through that first stage now, right? So yeah,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
you went back into these and you're seeing that anger. Like it's intense, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. It's hard to reach people that don't want to be reached. That's the thing. So it's
Yeah.
like I'll work with somebody who wants, you know, to be helped. And if somebody wants to cling to, like, it's like you said, it's a self-righteous, like you offer,
Yes.
so this is going a little bit of a tangent, but again, you offer up something as like, this could help you, and then it will challenge something. So then it will be like, and then people get very aggressive as well. And it'll be like, oh, you were never
Yeah.
sick. You just, and it was like, okay, well, yeah. I mean, if that's how it's gonna be, I'll use my energy somewhere else.
Exactly. It's the moment where you're like, okay, got it. Moving on.
Yeah, I got it. You've told me like your belief system, and maybe you don't even realize it, but I can see quite clearly where you actually want to stay, and that's in this numbed out state, basically.
Right. But it's also being able to hold a space that's judgment free for that.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that's tricky. It's
yeah,
tricky because it's an art, right?
yeah, yeah,
And
exactly.
that's really where we're going right now with the evolution and what happened last December and the shift into consciousness. But anyways, sorry,
Yeah.
see, I digress. But we're this whole year is about
Yeah.
communication with ourselves, learning how to
Mm.
communicate and noticing how much we use judgment as our foundation for communication in everything.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
That doesn't,
That's
like, just in our own selves.
yeah. Yeah. It's so true. Like judgment, um, yeah, like releasing judgment on every single front has been something I've been talking about a lot, or just coming up a lot for me this year. So it's incredible that you say that,
You're right on
because
par with what's going on. Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
it's
We are literally doing it every week in my community. We hit on another topic of it. It's because it's so important. Like, we have to understand
mm,
all sides of it, right? And our human
yeah,
minds are overwhelmed. We can't
yeah,
do that, but we can see it from the soul and universal perspectives, which is amazing. Okay, keep going.
yeah, 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 exactly. Okay, yeah. So, um, yeah, so then what happened is, so now dropping out of university, that was like a big having to let go of a lot of identity that I had tied into. So if my relationship ended, so there was the thing, okay, I'm not the boyfriend anymore. Then I lost all my exercise. So that was a massive thing, was I stopped exercising entirely because of the fear, because everything I was reading online, right? So then I went into these chronic fatigue syndrome spaces, and they were like, the only way you're ever going to get better is if you rest and you don't do anything that triggers a symptom. So
Yeah.
now
I
you
remember
feel
hearing that and people warning me about that. And I was like, nope, my message was the more I like,
yeah.
if muscle is what, because muscle holds the most oxygen. So here I
Mm,
was, same place, no energy. I couldn't even lift 1 5 pound weight over my head. And I was like, that's okay. Every day it's going to get
mm,
better and every day it's going to get stronger.
yeah.
And now it's awesome, but it took years but yeah, keep going. This is good. I
Yeah.
feel like honestly, Kyle, I feel like we could talk for 2 days and it still wouldn't be like, it's just, yeah, it's
There's
fun.
so many little tangents fighting on
Yes.
everywhere. I don't know. There's so many places to go. But yeah, is exactly, so looking back, I can see how detrimental that, but everything had its purpose. Like, it forced me to go more within now that all of my coping mechanisms were gone. So again, I had to challenge this and release it at some point, but it forced me to look in places that I wouldn't have looked. Basically, it was like, okay, so it probably wasn't the right thing on like a health level, and all of that was like, okay, I'm going to stop all exercise. But again, it was like, it was trying to get to the roots of the problem. It was like a part of me was saying, okay, if I have to sort out something, what I'm going to do, I remember and I've spoken about this with people before. It was like, my things got worse the more seriously I try to take it. Was like, I'm going to do whatever it takes to sort out the root of this. But that was because I was going more to the root of it as
Yep.
well. So
And of course the fear comes up even more, and our society
yeah,
is scared because we've been
yeah,
raised on a medical system that covers everything up, puts a band-aid on top of it, that does
mm,
not go to the root and pulls
yeah,
it out from the inside to restore the cells. It's like, no,
yeah,
let's cover it up, keep it hidden in the cells, keep it hidden in the cells, which is
yeah, yeah,
scary. It's scary when
yeah,
you're going against mainstream. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So I was, yeah, losing identity, which and exercise, and then I was finding the exact right resource that I needed at the right time, right? So it was like initially those other books, and then I what started happening is I found the right person to work with. So I was like, okay, I need to find a chronic fatigue syndrome specialist. And then I found somebody at the University of Cape Town, was like the first person that I'd seen that was talking about long COVID. And she had some presentation, and she was the first person that said, hey, you can actually recover. And I was like, okay, I need to speak to this person, because she had a long COVID rehabilitation program and was like, this is how you're going to get back to, being
Yep.
functional. And I was like, okay, this is not what I've been seeing online. Or I was trying all these different things. I was
Yeah.
trying diets, and I was trying this, and I was trying that, but nothing was working. And she put me in touch then with a physiotherapist who had a background in mindfulness. And some part of me knew that was, I remember she gave me two options, right? She was like, I can't work with you because I'm too busy, but these are two physiotherapists that I think that can help you. They can work with people. They have experience working with people with chronic pain and chronic illness and this and that. And I remember I was always terrible at decisions, right? Because I was always trying to do it I wasn't in touch with my intuition. I didn't know how to just feel into the right decision, which is much nicer way to live nowadays. But back then I was like, what's the right decision? What's the right decision? And then like tearing my brain cells out trying to figure out what the right decision was. And it was like, I remember this. I was like, how do I choose which one it is? And then eventually it was like, oh, okay. I also at that point, I was just starting to touch on meditation where I was like, okay, I need to, yeah, find a way to kind of decompress and all of that. And she's got a background in mindfulness. So let's go with her. But again, like looking back at it now, it was like the impact that that had on my longer term journey. It was like, that was the only choice I ever could have made. But yeah, it was, yeah, it's just such an amazing synchronicity that that's the person that I ended up working with. And then the next person that came into my life that was an amazing teacher was, I don't know if you know Sam Harris at all.
No.
So he's a massive, he's quite big in the US. He's written books about like critiquing religion, and then he's got this incredible app about like a kind of philosophical, neuroscientific, and spiritual approach to awakening and
Okay.
like seeing through the illusion of the self, basically. But he comes from a very like scientific rationalist background. Like he's got an incredibly sharp mind, and he's got a degree in philosophy, but he's studied like years and years in like meditation traditions like Dzogchen and Vipassana and stuff like that. So he's got a lot of deep insight as well. But he was the perfect person at the time for me to go deeper
Yeah.
down the spiritual path, because I could resonate with him because I was so identified with the intellect at that time, where I was like, okay, I want to. Yeah, at the same time, I was really starting to explore philosophy and stuff as well, because what had happened now was that this had opened up the possibility for me to find truth. It was like it was part of me was actually really enjoying what was going on, to be honest. Like I
Right.
remember I remember
It's like
like
a, yeah, twisted. It seems twisted to the outside. It's the same thing. Like when everything seems normal on the outside, or because it's
yeah,
perfect
yeah,
and you're
exactly.
crazy inside. Now it's completely opposite. It looks crazy on the outside, but it's so normal in here. It's great.
Yeah. It was so funny. I remember I used to send like voice notes to old friends that were trying to figure out what the heck was going on with me. And I was explaining to them, like, yeah, look, I've had, my health is absolutely deteriorated. I can't exercise, I can't study. But I was so like happy talking to them on the voice note. I was like, but it's amazing, I'm learning all this stuff. And because I had freed up myself from all of these identities and roles that I like thought that
Yeah.
I had to be, and it was this relief of my attention and my energy to be like, okay, now I can actually start to explore truth. And yeah, I was again coming at it from a very intellectual perspective, because that's where I had to start based on who I was at that time.
Yeah.
And yeah, Sam Harris was so helpful for me because his app is incredible, because it introduces you to mindfulness and meditation, but he's not looking at it from purely a kind of health and wellness space, like other like it's great like the way mindfulness is being used in that spaces, but he's like, there's something deeper here, right? You can see through like who and what you think you are. And at first, like it was so incredible, like it was resonating in some part of me was just saying yes, 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 I need
Yeah.
to listen to this guy, this is amazing, because it was bringing everything together, right? I was like, I wanted it was answering finally this question of like, who am I? And now there's this guy talking about it from a neuroscience, philosophical, spiritual perspective. And yeah, it started. So I was doing, and he started doing these like non-dual investigations, like looking into, can you find a self in your experience? Can you find, if you're listening to a sound, there's a sound, and then it feels like there's the perception of the sound, but you know,
Yeah.
can you find that? So this is when I started to do more inquiry. But at first, I was like touching in and jumping out of it, right? So I would like
Yeah.
use this app a bit, and then I would, go and focus on health again, and like go find the diet that's gonna fix me, all
Totally
of
know
that.
that feeling. Yep. Yep.
Yeah, and at the same time, I was also working with a psychologist now, and I was working with this other this physio, like this, I would call it like a chronic health coach basically, but she was also pushing me onto the spiritual path because she it was incredible working with her. She was such a warm and compassionate person, and it was like one of the first times I felt this space of like we're talking about earlier, like non-judgment and like openness and warmth to, you know,
Speak
deal with my
freely.
struggle, and
Yeah.
speak freely, and open up to these parts of myself. And yeah, she was the first person telling me that I can feel my emotions, right? So I remember talking about all these kind of things, and again, it was this big thing at the back of my head, and I was like, she was talking about dealing with fear, and you just like using mindfulness as a way to kind of just flow with the emotion rather than try to fix it or do something about it. And I remember that actually quite clearly the first time I actually tried it experientially. Like we'd had a session and we'd spoken about it, and then I was like, this was building up, and this is what had always been happening in the past. Was like it would build up, and then I would go to the gym, and then I would go and go on my phone, and then I would just get more and more like tensed
Yep.
up and irritable, and like just this, yeah, because there's something that needs to be felt, and I was fighting against it so strongly. And then she's like, no, you can like just feel it. And I remember like it started happening, and I was like, whoa, like it's not, I don't die, it's not the end of the world the way my mind thought it was gonna be.
Yep. It's
Yeah,
amazing, right?
yeah,
There's
yeah,
there's freedom in it, and it's so simple, and it just flows, and it just comes to you.
yeah.
And yet there's also a primal fear that, and the reason that there's a primal fear is not of the experience itself. It's knowing that once you do that, you can never go back to this version of Kyle over here. You will be
Right.
forever changed. That's the part that we resist. We're not resisting the actual experience. We're resisting knowing we can never not know.
Mm,
Never
mm,
again can you unknow. And I feel like, as I've gone through this journey in the last 20 years, that has forever been a pattern. Like I can never unknow what I know now. So I
yeah,
can't pretend I don't. So I can't go back and do what I was doing before and, ignore this or
yeah,
ignore
yeah,
that,
yeah.
because you can't, right?
Yeah,
Once
you
you
can't.
know,
That's the thing. You can't turn a blind eye anymore. It's like
no.
yeah, it's the same how things feel nowadays when something needs to be addressed. It's like, well, should I have to address it?
You'll have to check out episode 39 for the continuation of this amazing conversation. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed this conversation and want to learn more, head on over to michellevickers.com. Join our mailing list to receive new episodes right to your inbox, or apply to be a guest on the show. If this episode made you think of someone while you were listening, forward the link onto that person with a little note about why it made you think of them, because the greatest gift you can give another human is to see the beauty and purity of who they truly are. Until next time, stay curious.